Okay. I pressed the recording button. I hope it's working.
It
says it's recording.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, if I play this, can you hear it? It's just gonna be me saying check, 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 check.
Check, 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 check.
Did you guys hear that?
Yeah.
All right, I'm good to go. So you guys can just let me know whenever you're ready.
All right. Let's wait for everyone to get settled in.
Cool.
Should I give everyone? I'm gonna give everyone the co-host stuff.
Check one. Okay. I just switched my audio over again. Is that working okay?
Yeah.
There we go. That's better.
I hear you.
Cool. All right, cool. Yeah, let me know when you guys are ready and I will get rolling.
Let's just give it a few more minutes, just see if any stragglers come in, and then we'll just get started.
Hey, Kent. Were you able to watch those jazz workshop videos? Did you guys get those okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, they're awesome. Yeah.
How's it been going doing the virtual version of this? I'm glad you guys kept it going.
It's been a experience.
Are you guys going to do a performance video?
No, not this year. We were thinking about it, but it sounded like a little too much to coordinate.
It'd be easier to do smaller, like chamber groups, than try to do the whole
people.
giant thing.
Yeah.
Well, after we talk about this today, some of you, if you just wanted to throw some things together, could probably do that. So.
Yeah.
Are any of my CCA people in recording arts or digicomp this year?
Well, I'm trying to take digicomp next year. I'm trying to switch out of advanced topics into digi, but I shall see.
Cool. It's funny, that picture that I used as the background is from the CCA room, but it was taken very close up, so it's bizarrely disproportionate. Like the speakers are way too big and the gear is way too big, but that's okay. Makes me tiny.
All right, we'll just get started for now then.
Okay, cool.
All right, so for everyone here, hi, I'm Nathan Wu. I'm a senior at CCA. I've played the trumpet for the past 7 years. And this is Nate Jarrell, obviously the Lord and Savior of jazz band and rock band and all the music CTE classes. And just a forewarning, we are going to be recording this session. So if you don't want your face or voice to be on the recording, feel free to just interact through the chat. I will be monitoring it and then just writing down your questions. Nate's going to do his presentation, and then near the end, we'll open up a space for you guys to ask anything you have questions remaining on. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Welcome everybody. I'm happy to be doing this and excited to see some familiar faces and some new people. And as Nathan was saying, I teach all of the recording and audio stuff at CCA, and could just talk about that all day. So I was happy to get to do this. So I'm going to go over this in a few different ways. I'm going to start by talking about the best approaches to recording yourself at home if you don't have equipment. So if you're just using a device, computer, iPad, phone, whatever, and how to approach that, and some strategies for making that sound as good as possible. It's really surprisingly possible to get some pretty high quality sounding things that way. And then I'm going to talk about some options for if you already have some audio equipment at home or would like to acquire some. So I sent Nathan a link to a Google Drive folder that has some documents that you guys can download. And in there, I have a equipment list of quality things that won't totally be outrageously expensive. And we'll look at all those and talk through how to kind of get yourself set up. And then Nathan also sent me the list of questions you guys had before we started. And I was already covering quite a bit of that in what I was planning to talk about, but I've got those here, and we'll go through some of that as well to kind of get you rolling. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here and start showing you some of the stuff that's in the documents that I've got there, and then talk about some options that you have. Things are getting better and better in this world, and so it's getting a lot easier to pull these kinds of things off from home in a pretty quality way. So first thing is obviously you need a device. So whatever you happen to be using, whether it's a iPad, iPhone, computer, there's a few ways that I think are more beneficial to you getting a good sound. One of them, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. And I'm going to pull up a site and show you guys, let's see, let me pull it up here. You guys seeing that okay? I can't see you guys right now, so if somebody can holler out that you are.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
good.
So this, you can obviously just record straight into your phone or your iPad or whatever, and that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to have some more options for editing purposes, to be able to do more to it, and things like that, this is a great free thing that all you have to sign up for it with is an email. I'm going to be using it in Digicomp if you're in Digicomp, since we won't be at school on our usual stuff, those of you that are at CCA. And it's called BandLab. I don't know if any of you have already worked with this or are familiar with it at all, but it's fairly impressive what you can do in this, and it's entirely web-based, and it's totally free. So you just go to bandlab.com and sign up for an account, and then when you open a project, this is what it looks like. So when you're recording in the real world and in the professional world and outside of just using your phone, you're typically recording into what's called a digital audio workstation. People refer to that as a DAW all the time. And this is basically an online version of a DAW. So in the professional world, you're talking about Pro Tools or Logic or any of the number of other different options for that. And we'll look at some of those in a little bit here. But the nice thing about this, it just uses your camera from your device. And I'm going to record myself in here real quick just while I'm talking so you can see. It's cutting me off right now, but right now it's recording me talking. I've got it set up. I'm not using just my device. I'm talking into a mic through an audio interface. But then everything I just recorded is there right now. So if I play that back, cutting me off right now, but right now it's recording me talking. I've got it set up. Okay, and the nice thing about using this as opposed to just your device's audio is you have a lot of editing options after the fact. So often when you record on a device, it's not quite as good quality as when you're using a good mic. And so this gives you some options to go back in and be able to work with that audio a little bit to get it closer to sounding like it was recorded that way. There's some other things we'll talk about in just a minute that will help you get there on the original recording too, the space and distance and all those sorts of things. But wanted to share this with you guys because I think it's a really, really great resource. And so once you have your audio recorded, you're able to, I've got that track that I've made, and then I can go to effects, and I've got all kinds of options of things I can add here. So I can go into it, and let's say I had done this on my phone, and it was a little bit, sounded like I was in a tin can or something. I can put an EQ on this, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit in more detail. I'm not going to just throw you under the bus here with not explaining anything with how this is going to work. And you can do a little bit of EQ work on this. So if I play it back, I'm just going to loop it. You have to hear me say the same thing over and over. Cutting me off right now, but right now it's recording me talking. I've got it set up. I'm not using just my device. I'm talking into a mic through an audio interface. So we'll talk more specifically, but there are some areas that are often problem areas, especially when you're recording that way at home, that you can do certain little cuts in certain frequency ranges, and suddenly your setup, I'm set down significantly better than it did. So I'm not going to do a whole tutorial on how to use everything in here, because that would take up way too much of our time. But there are YouTube tutorials on how to do all of this stuff in BandLab. I'm creating a ton right now because I've been doing that for the last couple of weeks because we're going to be using it in class quite a bit at CCA since we're doing all of our stuff online. But this is a great resource to use instead of just recording into your computer. And so all you have to do is, as long as you're on a Wi-Fi connection, you can record into this, and then you've got all these options. You can add more tracks and layer yourself. So you could do one of those multi-window videos and have 4 parts recorded and then be able to mix them in here with levels and how you pan things and all kinds of stuff. So you guys are living in a really great age for this stuff because there are pretty incredible options for what you can do with that. So moving on from that, though, let's talk a little bit more about the best way to approach this. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because I like to be able to actually see you guys, and then I'll start sharing again once I pull some of that stuff up. If you have questions, too, as we go, don't be afraid to stop me. So just chime in and ask, because you don't have to just sit there silently if I'm going too fast through something. So if you are at home, well, actually, quick question for you, and you can either type this into the chat or raise your hand if your video is on or whatever. But how many of you do have some sort of microphone audio interface type of setup at home at all? Anybody? Nobody? Looks like we have a couple thumbs up and a yes. So not too many people. Okay, so most of you will be recording with just whatever device you have. Okay, so a few considerations, and you guys asked about this in the questions that Nathan sent me, is one, a big thing is the room that you're in. People will often, Kent was just at the summer jazz workshop that I run that we did online this year, and we did performance recordings and put videos together and stuff for that. And some of them sounded great, and some people sent us ones that took a lot of fixing on our end to make them all work okay. And a lot of that is the space that you use. So my suggestion is that you always use, for this kind of recording, a very dead space. And by that I mean carpeted, smaller room, low ceilings, somewhere where if you walk into it and clap your hands, you're not going to hear a bunch of sound bouncing around the room. So if in your house you have an entryway that's tile floors and high ceilings and a big space, that's probably not where you want to do it. And the reason for that, some of those spaces can sound really neat to sing in or play in or whatever because you get this natural reverb. The problem with that is it will record all of that natural reverb on your recording. You can always add more reverb if you want to make it sound a little more realistic. You can't take it away. So it's much better to do it in a dead space that's not going to have a lot of that natural reverb happening. And if you're using BandLab, that's one of the effects you can add. There's reverb effects you can add. So, and when you do add them, I suggest going very subtle, unless you're going for some strange effect, but you can make it sound much more realistic that way, but you want to have control over that as opposed to losing control over that by just having that stuck on your recording, because there won't be anything you can do about it if it sounds way too much like it's bouncing around a room. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? That's kind of the first thing. The other thing you want to play with it is proximity to the mic on your device. So if you play a much louder instrument like trumpet or any kind of horn, or you're just playing pretty loudly on whatever you're playing, you don't want to play straight into it. You want to play a little maybe to the side of it and a little further back from it. And that's going to take some experimentation because it's going to depend on the room that you're in. It's going to depend on your device itself, because all of them have slightly different mics in them and things like that. So there's not a right answer for exactly how far you should be away from it. But what you want to make sure of is that you're not getting distortion happening. So if you're playing at too high of a level, in the real recording world, professionally, you've got control over the levels you are recording at so that you don't get that happening. those are set at specific levels that you can't really change. So you're going to have to play with the distances and make sure that it's not distorting on you. Listen back, make sure you're happy with that quality. And that's going to be different in every space for every person. But those are the things that you want to consider when you're not using a microphone. So let me look at your questions that you guys had. Does anybody have any questions real quick before I show a couple more things?
I think Esther posted one in the chat was, do you have any recommendations on how to make a room more dead with like physical objects?
Yes, that's totally doable. So moving blankets work great. Mattresses, anything like that, even like in my house, I wish we had an extra bedroom I could turn into a studio, but everyone has a person living in it. So I'm stuck in a space that's not totally ideal here at home, but I've made it work really well. Even bookshelves, if you take a bookshelf that is totally full of books, it kind of acts as a diffuser. Closets are awesome. If you're doing video, you have to consider the fact though that maybe you don't want a mattress leaning up against the wall and you don't want to be in your closet. So you kind of have to think about those things. If you wanted to get a little fancier with it, hanging stuff on your walls, if it's something that you're going to do a lot of, so you think it's going to be a permanent fixture, there's fairly inexpensive things you can even purchase, foam type things and stuff like that that you can hang up. Some of them work better than others. Some of them they're even marketed as actual audio soundproofing material, don't work that great. So usually you want them to be about 2.5, 3 inches thick, and there's particular materials. And I didn't put any of that in what I shared, but I can maybe send that to Nathan and he could disperse it to you guys if you want. If you're handy, you can build them. You can buy sheets of soundproofing insulation at like Home Depot for pretty inexpensive. You just cover them with fabric and hang them on the wall, and they work really pretty well to absorb a fair amount of sound. And the places that you want them are going to be obviously along side walls, behind you. If you're really getting crazy with this, hanging them from the ceiling above wherever exactly you're recording, because you don't get reflections going back and forth. But that said, you don't really have to spend any money to do that. If you're in a carpeted, smaller bedroom, you're probably totally fine. So it's going to be pretty dead anyways for something like that in a room like that. So you just got to kind of pick your spot. If you're only doing audio, go in a closet with a bunch of clothes hanging there and it'll do the job great. But if you're doing video, obviously that's not going to look as awesome. Which brings up another point of, if you're doing video for these kind of things, then you do want to consider your background as well, because if you're going to be putting that out to the world, you probably don't want your family running through, or your whatever messy stuff is behind you. And then also considering other background noise. If you've got an air conditioner that's loud, or if you have a fan on, or if you're by a window where the trash truck is going to go by, or your neighbor's using a leaf blower, like whatever kind of thing like that is going on is going to end up on your video. And sometimes you might think it's not really there until you throw a pair of headphones on and then go, oh, I can totally hear that. So, so those are the kind of things to turn off your air conditioner and make your family, unfortunately, roast for a while you record, or things like that that are going to be in the background and hard to get out if you're hearing this sound behind you. So those are all kind of prime things to think about when you're planning on recording. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, because I'm going to pull up some of the stuff that I put in the Google Drive link and share a couple things with you guys. And then I'm going to go through also some things that you can look at equipment-wise as time goes on if you want to do more of this. I think this is pretty, for any musician, I mean, pandemic aside, for any musician living in the 21st century, these are skills that you pretty much need to have. You guys are living in an age where this stuff is totally doable from home at a fairly high quality. That wasn't the case in the past. It cost a lot of money to be in a studio with a lot of expensive equipment. Now you can do this at home for a pretty low amount of money and get really good results. And so people are just going to expect at certain points that like, you might be working on something with somebody on the other side of the country, and this is all happening a lot now because people are doing these collaborations since we can't do live performances, but that's not going to stop because we have the capability to do something with somebody who's not there with you. And so being able to do this well will open a lot of other performance doors and opportunities and things like that for you too. So I would definitely invest some time in this. It doesn't mean you have to become a pro audio engineer to the degree that somebody that's working in this field is going to be, but knowing enough to get around and make it sound good is going to be important. Okay, so I'm going to pull my screen back up here again. And oops, I keep going to my desktop. There we go. So there's a few things. Here's the folder that I put together for you guys. And I'm going to pull this up first before we get into the other things. This is what we put together for the Summer Jazz Workshop when we were having everybody record their parts. And this is really good advice on how to do this. Okay, so when you're recording at home, if you're doing just something by yourself, you can do this obviously however you want. But if you're putting something together where you want to maybe do a collaboration with 2 or 3 other people, what you want to do first is make some sort of track that you're going to use as your foundation that has a click on it. So a metronome playing for you, and maybe even a track of, like, even if it's not the real thing, a MIDI version of what you're doing, or somebody plays their part first or something like that, so that people have a reference, because otherwise it doesn't work out that well. And on that reference, you want to have intro clicks that count you off. Okay, so when you go to record that, you're going to use 2 devices. Okay, that if you have them. If you don't, you can still make this work. But you're going to use typically like a phone and a computer, or however you're going to do that. Now, the beauty of the BandLab thing, if you use that, is you probably don't need to use 2 devices quite the same way, because then you could actually have all your stuff set up in BandLab with a click and all that kind of stuff. And then hardwired headphones. If you're using the Bluetooth headphones, it tends to get squirrely and weird. The sound quality is not as good usually, and you get a weird delay sometimes. It won't sound like a delay to you, but it will be a delay from what's coming from your device to your headphones. And we're only talking like milliseconds, but if you're playing in and recording something to that, your recording may not line up to what you're hearing, may not be what's actually going on your device quite exactly the same way. And so you can experience issues with that. So wired headphones are better for that particular thing. There's some particular phone settings if you're using your phone. And it goes through that in here, and we don't have to talk through all of that. But if you go through and check these things off, it also tends to line your video up to your audio better, which means later if you're trying to edit that video and everything to the audio, it is much cleaner. Record in landscape, just say no to vertical video. It's always going to look better on a screen that way. And then when you do this, you're going to play the backing track that you've created in your headphones on one device. You'll record on the other device, but you unplug your headphones so that the initial clicks are heard, or you just clap to them, one or the other. So that if you are doing audio and video and having to do a mix and line your videos up, or just line your video up with other people, if you're using a video editing software, you can see the actual spikes of the claps and the audio waveform. And then you can just line all those videos right up, and you're not spending hours trying to get things lined up. So that's a really key way to make sure that's lined up. And then this just talks about some of the stuff we already talked about you know, where to stand and all that kind of stuff. Does that make sense to everybody? So if you guys were wanting to do some smaller chamber music things, that would be the process that I would use for that. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to some other stuff that I'm going to dive into?
We had one question. They were just asking, was there any recommendations on how to make instruments sound less sharp or flat throughout a video?
So do you mean in terms of you played sharp or flat, or do you mean in terms of the audio is not great, so it comes out that way, sounding that way?
I think it might be referring to the audio, because if it's the instrument, you can just tune yourself. But
yeah. So some of that is where higher quality recordings are going to help. Where you get that sort of weird thing happening with that, what happens is if you compress it too much, you can get these warbly sort of things happening. So what you want to make sure that you do, and some of this actually, if you are using that BandLab thing instead of your phone's audio or your phone's stuff to save it, you will run into that less actually, because it's saving it at a higher resolution for the audio. Sometimes certain people, it depends on your phone and it depends on what device you're using. Certain devices compress the audio more because they're trying to save space on the device for saving files. So when you compress that audio, you can get some of those issues happening. Sometimes you can get those issues if it's just distorting on you because you're too close to the mic too and things like that. But that's where, if you use the BandLab thing, you probably will run into that less because you're going to get a higher quality audio file. And then with BandLab, you can actually export it as a WAV file, which is a totally uncompressed file. MP3s are compressed, which means they've made them smaller, which means they've removed. It's kind of like taking pixels out of a picture to make it a smaller file. You get a less, blurrier picture that way. It's the same with the audio. So if you do that, you can save everything at high resolution audio files, which will be bigger files, but you'll have a much more successful time with them sounding good. Did I answer that okay?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So all of that covered, that's kind of the most you can do using just your device. A lot of it's going to be experimentation in your space and all those sorts of things. From there, it's going to involve acquiring some equipment. But in this day and age, you can do that really fairly inexpensively. So I put this together, and this is not by any means a comprehensive list. You can definitely find all of these things by different brands that are just as good and all that kind of stuff. But I put some on here that are going to work well at low prices, and I purposefully put things on here. There's nothing on here more expensive than $150. That is the most expensive thing that's on here. The cheapest thing that's on here, other than some of the software, in terms of mics and interfaces, is $100. And that's because if you go below that, at that point, it's really diminishing returns. You're not getting something that's probably going to do what you want it to do. But let me kind of walk you through this. So at the top here, I have a list of DAWs, so digital audio workstations. The only one that's web-based on here is BandLab, the one that I just showed you guys. But it's free, which is awesome. So if you're doing this from home, you're not mixing, pro level audio or things like that. It really does the job really well, and you can actually make it sound really good in there with what's available. It's a fairly impressive thing considering it's free and only online. Okay. The other ones here all have some sort of a price to them, except for Cakewalk. We'll talk about that in a minute. But they're very, very, very reasonable. So I'm going to open this one. And Pro Tools is the industry standard recording software that you're going to see in any professional recording studio that you go to. It's what we use at CCA in the recording arts class. The beautiful thing for you guys as students is there is really fantastic education pricing on Pro Tools. So this, you can do everything you could do in a professional setting here, and it gets as deep and complex as you want it to, or you can do kind of what I just did in BandLab, but you have a lot more possibilities in it. You can get a subscription to it where you're only paying $10 a month as a student, and you have the full, complete Pro Tools with all the plugins and everything that comes with that. So for the price of a couple of lattes at Starbucks, you have that every month. You can also buy the license outright, but it's really a pretty phenomenal deal if you are a student. So that's available. Logic, if you are a Mac user, is available. Only on Mac, though, because it's an Apple product. But it is awesome, just as good as Pro Tools, just Mac-based, though. And so that one I think is $300, but there's a student discount on that, and I couldn't actually tell you what that is. But the link is here. You can go check that out. Reaper is another really good one. You can get it for $60, which is really inexpensive. And then you have that in a software format. So again, these ones, because they are software, you could use them anywhere. So you don't have to be on Wi-Fi necessarily. You could be on an airplane and still be using this, or on a trip in the car or whatever. And then Cakewalk is another one, but it's free as well. It's a really great DAW. It's only available for PC. So, but it is free. So that's a cool one too. Let me go. I haven't taught in a while. I'm not used to talking for this long straight. Okay, so any questions on those before I move on to equipment on the software options? I can't see you guys, so I'm not seeing the chat right now.
You're good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Cool. So the next thing, if you are going to start getting into getting microphones, there are USB microphones you can get. I don't recommend those. They are not great. They really are not going to do I mean, it might be a little bit of an upgrade from and some of them are okay. They might be a little bit of an upgrade from your computer's microphone, but they're not going to be fantastic. The best route to go is to get an audio interface and one of these microphone options. And so you do need something that is going to translate the audio into computer talk and let the computer know what's going on. So you need an audio interface. So this is one right here. Okay, this is one that's on the list. The one I use, you can spend anywhere from $100 up to the one I use at home is $2,500. And the one I use when I'm out recording and stuff. But this little guy right here is this first one on the list. It's the Focusrite Scarlett Solo. It's $109. Okay, this will plug in by USB to your computer. You plug your microphone in here, or you have a direct-in instrument spot as well. And then this is going to send the audio to your computer. You've got control over the gain, so you can set that level depending on what you can't do with your device, basically, and you have to play with just your distance and things. It's got phantom power if you're using a condenser, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then headphone outs and monitor outs too in the back if you do have monitors at home, studio monitors to listen through. Okay, so that's one option for an interface. Okay, not terribly expensive. Now that's new. You can find people selling these all the time on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and eBay and wherever for like $50. Still working just fine. So that's one option for your audio interface. The second one that's on here is about the same price, equally as good. It's $129. Audient makes this one. Either one of those would be recommended, and both work really well. Okay. The reason you need that, besides just getting the audio into your computer, is any audio interface has what's called a microphone preamp in it. So when you plug into this, a microphone by itself is not going to produce the volume level that we need it to. So we have to plug into a preamp, and then that is going to amplify the volume that's coming in so you get the level that you need. These have really clean preamps, and what that means is they basically don't color the sound that you're getting at all. It's just a very clean representation of what's going into it. Higher end preamps, when you start spending a lot of money, actually warm things up or color the sound a little bit, but these will not make it better or worse. They will just get your sound in there as is, coming straight from your microphone. And they do the job really, really well. This kind of stuff that you can do now at home with one of these that costs you $100, even 30 years ago was basically not possible without spending a significant amount of money. So nice stuff about the time we are living in. Any questions on the interfaces at all?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. And you can still use that with BandLab. So even if you don't buy one of these, but you buy an interface, you just tell the BandLab that it's talking to the interface, and you can record straight in online with that. Now, microphones. We're going to talk about only two different kinds of microphones today. There's more than that. But a dynamic microphone and a condenser microphone. So a dynamic microphone is going to need to pick things up at a closer range, but is great for loud things because it can handle really high volumes without having any sort of distortion happening. Condensers can too, but dynamics especially can really deal with that well. And the one that I have on your list here is a classic mic that is in every studio in the world. It's probably on every, not every, but a ridiculous number of recordings you've heard in your life, and it's really cheap. It's $99. Again, you can find these used for like $50 too all the time. Even at places like Guitar Center, they'll have used ones in there for $50, $40. And so it's a dynamic microphone, which means it needs to be close range to whatever it's recording. It's not going to pick up a wide range around it. Okay. And it's very useful if you are recording electric guitar, any percussion or drum recordings. It can also work well on acoustic guitar and horns if you don't have a condenser microphone available. Super durable, super inexpensive, really useful mic. Okay. So that one is kind of a must-have. If you play any of those instruments, it would work very well. If you are a string player, horn player, play a lot of acoustic stuff, a singer, then you're going to be wanting to look at condensers. Okay, they're going to be a little more detail-oriented in what you get out of them, sound-wise. They also are going to pick up a wider array around them, so they don't need to be as close to you, and are going to pick up more of what's going on in the space. Okay, so I have two different kinds on here. The first is a small diaphragm condenser. And the one that I put on here, there's quite a few of these in this price range. I put this one on here because it's $100. You know, you can spend $5,000 on a small diaphragm or on any of these microphones, not on SM57, but this is a very inexpensive one that will do the job really well. Okay, so this is on Amazon. It's a Lewitt LCT 040. It's really small. It's almost like about the size of what you're probably seeing on your screen. But it really does a pretty good job. This would be a great microphone for strings. Okay. Acoustic guitar, could use it on percussion. Small diaphragm condensers are rather focused sounding, and often are what you're going to see on string recordings. And so that's one option, but there's many others out there. The one thing you need to keep in mind with condensers is they need to be powered. And so the little button on here that says 48V on any audio interface, it's right there, is what's called phantom power. And when your microphone cable is plugged into this, it's going to send power to that microphone. So if you buy one and you can't figure out why you're getting no sound, you want to make sure that your phantom power button is pushed. Okay. And then the other one I have on here is a large diaphragm condenser. This is just one particular model by Audio Technica. There's a number of others kind of in this price range, and then from there they go up from there. If you go much below this, you're probably not going to be super satisfied with the quality. But a large diaphragm condenser, just like it says, is a larger diaphragm. You can kind of see that circular thing inside of there behind the screen, and that's the actual diaphragm that's picking up the sound. It's a larger one than in a small diaphragm one. And that's going to be really useful on vocals, horns, strings again would work well with that, acoustic guitar, percussion, any sort of acoustic thing, upright bass, things like that. Doesn't mean you can't put it on a guitar amp or something too. You can. Drum overheads, a room mic, all kinds of different things. So those are just a few good choices if you want to sort of go down the road of having some equipment. And you will pretty quickly notice a much greater increase in the quality of your recordings if you do get some of this equipment. But basically, between the interface and the microphone, you know, for roughly $200 or less if you go used on things, you could be up and running, especially if you're using BandLab because it's free, to get some better recordings just in your bedroom. So that's kind of the equipment list I put together. Now, if anybody's interested in getting into this in a more in-depth fashion, you're welcome to email me and I can share with you more expensive options, because obviously this is on the lower end that's still going to give you a decent quality recording, but this can go as expensive as you could imagine it could go on all these things too. So any questions on that equipment at all?
I just had a question. How do ribbon mics compare to the condensers and the dynamic mics?
So ribbon mics are awesome. They are they're more fragile for one, because if you damage the ribbon, it's actually a little super thin piece of foil basically inside of a magnetic field that vibrates. You can have issues with it. They also, though, the good ones, there's not really cheap good ribbon mics. They're really delicate to put together. They have a lot more kind of in building them, and so the really good ones are really expensive. And so you would be much better off with a mid-level to low-level condenser than a really cheap ribbon mic, and that's why I didn't include them on the list, because any of the ones I would recommend are going to be pretty pricey. And so they are great, though. They typically pick up a figure-8 pattern, which means they're picking up from both sides of the microphone. The other issue with ribbon mics is their output level is low, so you need a preamp with a really high, where you can really crank the decibel level on it to get it at the same level as what you can get with a condenser or a dynamic mic. And so these little cheaper interfaces have much are not able to do that as much. So usually you have to buy either an outboard preamp, or there's a thing called a cloud lifter, which will give it a decibel boost to get your level up there. So that's why it's kind of it's a larger monetary investment to get a good ribbon mic and have that work for you than it is to get a good condenser mic. We are, though, whenever we are back at school again at CCA, and we could even open this up to people outside of CCA if they're interested. We did there's a ribbon mic company in town that does workshops on building them. And so last year, about 15 students built ribbon mics at CCA. And we built a couple for CCA, and they're awesome ribbon mics, and he takes you through the whole process and you build your own. That's to build your own with him at the workshop. It's $200, and you get to walk away with an extremely high quality ribbon mic. So whenever we are able to get together again, which may not be, I'm not sure when that will be, but want to do that workshop again as well. So that might be a thing down the road if you want to get one for less money. Any other questions on that before we move on?
I think we had one from Esther. It was for pianists specifically. Are there any like tips you have on positioning the mic when recording for auditions?
Yes. Are we talking about with a microphone or with a device?
I think both, I guess.
So with the mic, for that you definitely want a condenser, because you want something that's going to pick up the full range of the piano. So if you just stuck a dynamic mic over the middle of your piano, you would only be picking up basically the zone that the dynamic mic is pointing directly at. Condenser is going to pick up the wider array of everything below it. And there's a couple ways to approach that. If you only have one mic, a lot of times with the piano recording in the professional world, they're going to do a stereo pair of microphones over the piano so that you're getting a nice stereo field of the entire instrument, since it's such a wide range that we want to hear all of that. What I would do if you only have one is probably play with placement in your room. You can either go directly above, whether it's an upright or a baby grand or whatever, you can put it in the piano or directly above where all the hammers are hitting the strings. And probably a couple feet above that, so that you're picking up the full array of it. The other option is to just play with it as a room mic, because you can get really nice sounds from in your room as if somebody was just sitting back from the piano and listening to it. And for an audition video, that's going to work out just fine, because it's just solo piano and you'll hear it well. And so you can just play with maybe 4 or 5 feet back from your piano. And sometimes it sounds better from the side. Sometimes it sounds better from the kind of back end of it. It just depends often on the piano and the room. So that takes a little experimentation and just listening back to it, but that'll work really well for that kind of a thing too. So a large diaphragm condenser or a small diaphragm condenser will do that job really well in either of those two placements. Anybody else have similar questions about recording your own instrument? Because that's a good question.
Yeah, we got one from Kent, and it was about horn players specifically. What are the advantages of having the clip-on at the end of your bell versus a traditional microphone?
The clip-ons are used more often for live performance than they are in the studio. If you own one, though, that's a high-end good clip-on mic, you could definitely, of course, use that to record your saxophone, and it would sound good. More often in the studio setting, you're using a large diaphragm condenser to record, or sometimes dynamic mics, and it depends on what sound you're going for and how you're doing it and what the style is and things. But a large diaphragm condenser is typical. And so with that, usually you're just going to play right into where the diaphragm is, but just above your bell, and usually a couple feet away is going to give you a nice natural sound of what your horn really sounds like. The benefit of the clip-on ones when you're playing live is they reject a lot of outside sound. So if you're playing with a band, it's not picking up all of that as well, at least not much of it. And then also you can, move around and not be so stuck in making sure that your horn is straight in that mic on a stand. But in the studio, it tends to be more often a large diaphragm condenser on a stand. But again, that doesn't mean that you couldn't record with your clip-on if you own one, for sure.
Okay, and then we had one question on, I guess, the winds, like flute-ish or viola also as well.
Yep, flute, large diaphragm condenser will work great. You could totally record flute on an SM57 if that's what you had. Same with saxophone. They tend to be a little mid-range heavy and not as crystal clear or natural sounding, but a large or small diaphragm condenser would work for flute as well. And usually you're going to put that just a couple, anywhere. It depends on the sound you're going for. If you want more of a natural sound, you put it back a few feet from you so you get a little bit of room sound. If it's going to be in a mix or something with other things and you want much more of a close-up, a tacky sort of a sound, you can put it closer to you. For viola, or really any strings for that matter, small diaphragm condensers tend to be often what is used, although a large diaphragm condenser would work well for that as well. And you can do that a couple ways. You can place it sort of up above you, coming down at the instrument at an angle. My hand's getting lost in my filter. At an angle, say that microphone that's in front of me is the viola. You can put it coming down sort of at your soundboard that way, or your bridge. And that's one option. You can also come at it from the side. So if this was the side of the viola right here, you can come in at it from the side, maybe about a foot away like this too. And again, placement's an important thing, and every room you're in is going to sound different. So, there are tried and true placements that tend to work, but you may want to play with those kind of options. And that's going to be the same for violin. If you're recording a section, whenever you can get back together, like if you had 3 people over to your house and you wanted to record together, or a quartet or something like that, it's nice to be able to do that with separate mics. But if you only have one condenser, that can also be placed just up over the heads. You can put it on a stand coming in behind the quartet and pointing straight down right in the middle, maybe a couple feet above the center person's head. And you can get a nice actual stereo array of how they sound and have it be real natural that way too. So those are all options as well.
Awesome. And then there's a question that's a bit more general, but it's, are there like methods to limit echo when you record?
Really the method is to pick as dead a space as possible. If you pretty much, once you record a lot of echo and reverb from whatever space you're in on your recording, there's not much of a way to get rid of that. There are some plugins that are made, but that involves purchasing extra things that are supposed to reduce that a little bit and things like that. But basically, if you don't want much echo on your recording, you need to record in a space that does not have much echo.
Awesome.
That's pretty much the answer.
And then we have one from Diana, which was basically, if we're recording for a program that specifically states that we're not supposed to edit in any way, how should we record ourselves? Like, should we record ourselves in a room with reverb already, or?
What they typically are referring to most of the time with that is that they don't want you editing your performance. So, in the modern age, it's very easy to go in and fix mistakes and punch in and redo a section, or even go in and slide notes around. If you were slightly off, you can, chop up your audio and move a note so it's rhythmically in time when it wasn't when you played it. So what they're referring to a lot more on Auditions in terms of not editing is that sort of a thing, as opposed to, you could definitely edit your audio for better audio quality. Like, I don't think they're ever going to complain about higher audio quality. What they're really asking you to do is make sure that your performance is one singular performance all the way through, that you haven't doctored to make you sound better as a player than you actually are. And if I didn't really talk about this before, but if you record into BandLab, where the two devices come in is you can record your audio into BandLab, say on your computer, and your video on your phone, and then you have the ability to splice that better audio with your video using whatever video production software you want. It's pretty easy to splice them together. You just drop them both in, line them up, and then you have the option of having better sounding audio. And I don't ever think it's a bad thing to have really good sounding audio for your audition. So, if you EQ it a little bit, or even put I wouldn't go crazy with the reverb, because they're going to know it's not natural. And then that gets a little weird, but a little bit of reverb, so it has just a nicer space sound or things like that. That's not going to be as a deal breaker. They're just not wanting you to actually basically fake a performance by fixing it.
Awesome. Sweet. I think since we're running out of time, we're just going to move on to whatever topics you have left you want.
Okay. The other ones I don't really necessarily have to go through per se. They're just things you guys can reference if you want. And that way we can do some questions if people have them. Everybody was asking a lot about microphone techniques, and so I put this in here for you. And it's a great little PDF that has microphone techniques and placement and all those things for any instrument you would ever want to record. So, and it talks you through specifics of how to place them and all that kind of stuff. So we don't need to look through that right now, but if you are doing that at home, and you can look your instrument up in here and see some great options for placement choices. This is for if you're EQing after the fact. We don't have time to really get into this, but it talks about frequency ranges and where to boost or cut if you're hearing certain things that you're not liking and you want to fix some things like that. So those things I'm not going to hit on. I'm just going to let you guys have that info, because it's fairly self-explanatory, I think, to an extent at least. And so I'm going to stop sharing there. But that stuff is all there for you guys to peruse. And the mic placement one has great diagrams and shows you exactly how to place for different instruments and what's going to be successful and stuff like that. Because the placement is a big deal. When people do pro recordings in studios, they'll spend hours working on just mic placement on instruments. So, where a mic's placed on a kick drum, they will move it around and check. I mean, you can move a mic 3 inches to the side and it sounds completely different than where you had it originally. So placement's a pretty big deal. That makes a big difference. One question that was on your list of questions that you guys sent to that I thought was an important one, it said, assuming perfect technical recordings, how should students go about selecting one recording over another? What are their priorities when choosing? And my thing with that always is that you always pick the most musical performance. So that should win out over anything every time ever. I would choose, if there was a tiny mistake in the middle of something where you played a passage not exactly how you wanted to, or there's a slight rhythm that's off, but the whole performance is better than another take, I would pick that one every single time over the one that's 100% technically perfect. Because to a listener, like, it's music, right? So it could be technically perfect, but if it's technically perfect and has no musicality or passion, nobody cares. So that's always better. Even on pro recordings, there's story after story after story of people having kept takes that were less perfect because it was such a great performance. And that's always and it might bug you, but like, I'll oftentimes do a recording and immediately after I will hate everything I played. And then, but it ends up being the take that gets kept. and then I'll go back and listen to it a month later, and I can't even remember what I hated about it a month later, because at the time, whatever's in your head, you're still hearing in your head is what you wanted to have played, but it doesn't mean it was bad or wrong necessarily. So you have to be a little careful about how self-critical you are and look at the overall performance more than you look at every little technical detail. So that's kind of an important one too. I did a record, this jazz group that I play with, and we did like 4 takes on one of the songs, and whatever the take the guy picked, and it was recorded live, it was a jazz thing, so there was no overdubbing or anything. Whatever you took on your solo was what was on the record. And the take that he picked, I hated when we did the recording, but it wasn't my band, so I didn't have any choice, and I wasn't producing the thing. And I remember going, oh, that's the one you picked. I hated my solo on that. And then I remember it's on Spotify. I remember putting it on in the car like months and months after and going, did he actually pick the other take? And I couldn't even figure out why I didn't like my solo. So we can be our own worst critics sometimes. And it doesn't necessarily mean it was bad. It just wasn't what you meant to do at that second in time. So
Yeah. Awesome.
Any other questions before we kind of wrap things up? Hopefully that was helpful with all that stuff. And this is a topic that you can go on forever and get as deep as you want to. If some of you take recording arts with me, we will go much deeper on all those things. But any questions I can answer for anybody else?
I think we had one that we kind of, or 2 we skipped over because we're running out of time, but now that we have time. I guess the first one would be from Esteban. We have tips on using an SM57 for trumpet, how to just maximize it.
You can, an SM57 can be really actually very successful on trumpet. It'll work really well. It's got a heavy mid-range and handrails upper end things really well too, and so it kind of does the range of the trumpet well. You can get a little bit of a honky or nasally sort of sound from it depending on the space you're in and how close you are and proximity and all that kind of stuff, sometimes from a 57. So occasionally it'll just be an EQ thing after the fact where you might need to go in and maybe cut a little bit of that out or find that frequency that is kind of a troublemaker. But you can get, I mean, really, you can get great raw trumpet recordings that sound pretty natural with a 57. It handles loud stuff really, really well. So you can even be right in it, just blowing as loud as you can, and it'll deal with it well as long as you have your preamp set so you're not peaking and distorting. So it's definitely if you own one, it's a very usable option for a trumpet for sure.
Okay. And then we had one from Janice, which was when she records with her clarinet, she puts the microphone on the floor since that's right under the bell. Is that a good thing to do? You know,
actually, recording clarinet, I wouldn't put, are you talking about a microphone or are you talking about a phone or some sort of device?
She typed microphone, I think.
Okay. I probably wouldn't put it on the floor. Typically, if you have a mic, there's 2 ways you could do that. You can either mic the bell, or sometimes clarinet sounds really nice with the mic out in front, sort of in the middle of the clarinet too. I'm always, especially with classical music, I'm always thinking about it sounding like it would actually sound if a listener was out in front of it. Because if you're recording a rock band or something, you're doing a lot of like processing and manipulation and things. If you're recording classical music, you want it to sound like you're just sitting in a space listening to classical music. So that's why sometimes I think it's almost more successful on clarinet. I'll take a condenser and put it a few feet away, about mid-height of where if you're playing your clarinet like this, about mid-height of where the middle of the clarinet sort of is. And if you really think about it, when you play clarinet to an audience, you're not sticking the bell of it up in somebody's ear, and that's how they're listening to your clarinet playing, right? So often I would pretend that you are sitting in a seat out in front of you if you want a really good solo classical recording, and think about where that person would be listening to it, because that's where your mic is going to be listening to it. And that's probably going to give you the most natural sound for your instrument.
Awesome. All right. Since we're out of time, just thank you so much, Nate. This was awesome. Also, Sebastian says he misses you a lot and he loves you. So,
Well, tell Sebastian I miss him and love him. He should have joined us, even though he probably wasn't in this. But yeah, it's great to see all of you guys. Some of you I'm excited to see in a couple weeks. We're frantically putting together how this is going to work for school, and I think it's going to work a lot better than it did in the spring because we've actually had time to prepare for it. So, but looking forward to seeing you guys, and that was super fun. So thanks for asking me to do that.
awesome. Thanks,
Cool.
Nate.
Absolutely.
All
Good to see
right. Everyone, don't forget we have more live sessions later today. I don't know what the time is, but
Oh my God.
3 to 4. 3 to 4.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank
Sweet.
you guys.
Bye, Nate. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
thank you.